Hi, and welcome to Wrong Way. And today we are going to review one of the biggest electric unicycles ever made, the veteran Abrams. So, let me tell you more about it. Wrong Way. Before we get into the video, the war in Ukraine is still going on with the Russian aggression, so if you have any way to support Ukraine, check the links below and go on protests. Alright. So this video is the full review of the veteran Abrams. I've already had it for over a month, for nearly 2 months. I've put around 700 kilometers on the clock, so this will be a real case scenario of using the wheel on day-to-day basis. So in this video we'll talk about 6 criteria as usual in my reviews. This will be safety, durability, ride, performance, practicality and features, and the conclusion about the wheel. But before we get into that, a little overview of the veteran Abrams. And while it might look like the wheel is a successor to the highly successful, although it also had its kinks, veteran Sherman, it is actually a wheel that's being produced alongside with it. And with the success of the Sherman, you'd think that Leatt went back to the drawing board and made everything even more superior, but in reality, the veteran Abrams is just weird. First of all, it's a huge wheel, and it even trumps my Monster Pro that I had before by being a bit wider and a bit more bulky. It weighs 46 kilograms, and yet it has a smaller battery than the Sherman. Some of the design choices are questionable to say the least, like the lack of a inner shell and the distribution of the batteries, which are basically not taking up any space at all in the shell. This wheel is big, yet the performance doesn't seem to be big whatsoever. Now, all of this is not to say that I didn't enjoy riding the wheel. I very much did, and a 22-inch wheel provides enormous levels of comfort, especially on longer cruises. However, it is definitely not as clear-cut of a choice as a veteran Sherman, but more of a niche product. And especially with advertising this wheel about off-road use and highest performance, well, the Sherman is just better in those areas. So with that said, let's paint you a clearer picture about this weirdly interesting product that is the veteran Abrams, starting with safety. So let's start with weatherproofing. And although the main control board area is pretty well sealed off from the elements, the plug that connects the battery to the control board is not much so. The XT90 plug, although being a good power transfer from the battery to the control board, is not water resistant, and it is just dangling there, not in the inside of a sealed shell, but between a fender and the battery cases, which are essentially just sealing it off via friction. So while on most rides you might be still fine with riding this thing through the rain or through some puddles, I wouldn't call it a well water resistant wheel. And this area is definitely inferior to the veteran Sherman. Now moving on to the batteries and the electrical layout of the veteran Abrams, it is a very similar layout in terms of electronics to the veteran Sherman. So there is no hot charge port, so that's already better than Bigode. However, I am not sure whether the BMS has a separate P line for charging. What this line would do is prevent a short circuit between the BMS and the battery. However, as we've seen with the Sherman, there weren't really any big flaws with this sort of system, except for mechanical damage of the BMS, but that's a different story. And the additional fuses between the board and the batteries do help out to make this whole system a bit safer. Now, this is not as safe as a battery layout as on a Kingsong or a InMotion wheel, but there is communication between the BMS and the control board, so if something were to go wrong with the BMS on one side or the other side in terms of batteries, then it would bring you to a stop. So it's definitely better than Bigode, however, not on the level yet of InMotion or Kingsong. The BMS is a pretty primitive BMS with balancing the cells passively in both battery packs. There's one per side. So I'd really like to see a at least smart BMS in the future where I could check the individual cell sets to see if the voltages are right, just as what we see now on the Kingsong S20. Next up, what I wanted to talk about in safety is the relation of the battery and battery cells to the motor and control board. And in this case, I really think that they chose a too small battery without any high discharge cells. These are just regular Samsung 50Es high capacity cells for this really big wheel and heavy 3.5 kilowatt motor. What this means is, well, firstly, the batteries will not have a long lifespan like maybe on the Sherman because they will be constantly under stress. There's also no temperature sensor in the batteries, by the way, which in my opinion should be there or could be there. And second of all, I think that this wheel actually cannot sustain its peak performance. We've already seen 3 cutouts on the veteran Abrams, and all of those, in my opinion, had one thing in common, and that was a sustained powerful acceleration. There were no beeps, there was no pedal dip, the wheel just turns off. And in my opinion, this just goes to show that the 6P setup here with this huge motor and huge 22-inch tire is just not enough to propel riders to higher speeds. And especially if you want to accelerate hard, if you are a heavier rider, I think that the battery cells just can't keep up with that. And the solution to that is either to get high discharge cells and monitor the temperature to see if this is going all right, or to throttle this wheel, which I think that it already is a lot, to not allow riders to accelerate so hard. And this just goes to show you that Leatt did not test this wheel thoroughly enough and didn't embed proper system-wide alarms or other safety features and just allowed riders to fall without warning on their wheels, which is, as you might think, pretty bad. Moving on, there is no motor temperature sensor. Both Kingsong and InMotion do have that now. I would really like to see it also at Leatt. The system-wide tilt bag goes just up to 58 kilometers an hour. So if you want to ride just that fast, it's okay. But the wheel can reach even higher speeds. So I really wonder why they don't make this tilt bag even up to higher speeds, just like on the InMotion V12. There is tilt bag for overheating, so if the wheel gets too hot, it will throw you off, and also for low battery, which I did experience. There's also a pedal dip when over torquing the wheel. However, I think it's only usable at lower speeds. I think if it happens at higher speeds, well, you might be in for a fall then. All of this is usually also accompanied by a very loud beeper. It's really loud, you can hear it basically at any speed. So if the motor power or the control board power usage is over 70%, you will hear beeps. And yeah, they're just really audible, even better than on the Sherman. They start at around 73, 74 kilometers an hour at a full charge. So that's all about safety. If you have anything else to add, please put it in the comment section below. Now let's move on to durability. And over the 700 kilometers that I did with this wheel, I had 2 most notable problems with it. The first one being that the bearings broke and I had to exchange them after 70 kilometers, and I heard that's a common issue. I don't know how they will fix it in future versions, but here it was pretty quick. Then after changing those bearings, they were fine for a while, but after another 400 or 500 kilometers, they started making a noise again, and I'm still investigating that. They're not getting too loud, so I don't know, I will have to just investigate. The second problem being after a drop from a 35-degree incline onto flat, which I do very often on wheels, and this never happened to me.
Nie powiedziałbym, że to było proste. No, z felgi idzie. No.
With a pressure of 30 psi, there was a crack in the rim, and I also bent the rim a little. So yeah, still no strong rims by Veteran. I hope they change it. They made a new one reinforced for the Veteran Sherman. I hope they make one for the Abrams too. Part of the problem might have been the tire. It's, I think, rather thin for the weight of the Abrams. The maximum load of the tire indicated is 140 kilograms at 33 psi. But I think that for some stairs, some curbs, and other obstacles, you actually need to inflate it even higher to like 40 psi. And that's also the pressure I had doing the range test. The tire is also tubeless and it has slime inside. Now in my model the slime was distributed nicely, but in some other units I heard that it created oscillations and not a nice ride. The wheel being tubeless, I guess it's less prone to punctures, it's more puncture resistant. But then again, on the Abrams I had my first flat tire, so your luck may vary, especially with a weak rim and a rather thin tire. With that said, even though that the veteran Abrams has a roll cage and it actually has sort of a frame, I don't think that it is particularly strong. It's prone to bending, and I also saw some cracked units, so I'm not really sure if this is a better choice than the structure they had on the veteran Sherman. Dirt, mud, and some sticks. Soil can be picked up along the way and stay into inner compartments of the shell because you don't have this inner wall, which is also a bummer. I like the fact that the trolley handle is tall and it's pretty much the same quality or durability like on the Sherman, but in this case with the bigger tire and the bigger weight, it does actually feel a little more flimsy. I would like to see something more durable like the extremely robust trolley handle of the King Song S20. That being said, the veteran Abrams will have pretty strong L hangers and it has a hollow bore motor, so for heavier riders, just in terms of weight, it should be fine. However, some of the screws can get stuck, so you really do need the right tools to get this thing disassembled. In general, to repair the veteran Abrams, it's not too hard of a process. Everything is straightforward and very simple, and the choices of screws are pretty good in my eyes, so that's pretty well done. And now, if you want to get any more into detail in both safety and durability, feel free to check out my teardown vid. But now, let's move on to the ride. And the ride of the veteran Abrams is definitely something special. And if you thought that the monster with its 22-inch tire is comfortable, well, it really feels like a small zippy wheel compared to the veteran Abrams. The veteran Abrams is an extremely smooth cruiser. It's very comfortable in, everyday situations, and it just eats up miles very, very easily. I think that you definitely need more effort to accelerate or decelerate with this wheel. It's definitely feeling heavier, and the 22-inch tire with the heavy motor and rim doesn't help. And also turning requires more effort, and at low speeds you really need to be careful not to put too much weight on either side because the wheel might just throw you off because of the sheer weight. At high speed though, there is a huge gyroscopic effect which is in favor of stable high-speed cruising, but you definitely also need more effort for turns. And here I'm not really sure if I can take turns sharper at higher speed because of the stability, or if I really need more effort and I could do the same just with maybe a bit more wobbles on a Sherman. But once you get the hang of it, it's very rewarding, and it's sort of like a wheel gym for me, because once I get on the Sherman from after riding the Abrams, it feels so small and agile, however also not as stable. The wheel also doesn't exert any bit of train tracking or tram tracking, that is following lines along the road. It just goes where you want, and yet it has still tons of grip and response when in turns. I definitely feel that it turns a lot better, both than the Monster V3 Monster Pro, and it's probably one of my favorite wheels to turn, especially at higher speeds. Tons of grip, stability, and also responsiveness. However, there's a big problem, and the big problem is tons of pedal dipping. In turns, it's way more extreme than on the veteran Sherman. I don't mind it that much because I feel like the pedals just are a bit higher, or because of the different tire, it just feels a bit different, but there's still heaps of it. And especially in tighter turns, in 90-degree, 180-degree turns, you feel it a lot, and it's buttering. And the second part of pedal dipping, or almost pedal behavior, is that there's pretty much no strong mode. And although they say it's strong mode, it feels like, I don't know, it feels so mushy. And when accelerating, the pedals dip so hard that it's just not possible to do a proper acceleration test. And both when braking, it tilts like crazy. And I think that they definitely should fix this issue with a future software update. In general, I think that for heavy off-road trails, that means loads of inclines, sharp turns, steep declines, I think it just has too little torque, and it's too heavy to wheel around, and it has also a too big turning radius. Although the pedals are at a reasonable height, I think that in very technical trails, it's just too weak. Going on like usual paths in the forest, it might be actually quite good, and also roll over some roots, and it's quite manageable there. But if you want to have something more powerful, even the Sherman, I've took both wheels out on the same trail, and the Sherman feels so much better than the veteran Abrams. In regards of the 22-inch wheel, I think it's very smooth to ride this wheel over some small bumps, and especially on asphalt, on some brick roads, on even some worse quality roads. It behaves really well, and it gives you a huge sense of security, even when riding into a pothole, because it just like doesn't throw you off to the side. But if you have a bigger bump, it's kind of tedious to stay on the wheel, especially with higher pressure. It's just a lot of weight that is bouncing up and down. So for smaller bumps, it's very good for lower quality roads, but for some bigger bumps, and especially off-road, I think it's just like too much weight. A big upside of the Abrams is also the roll cage, which in this case is also closer to your hands, closer to your body, because the whole body, whole chassis sort of the wheel is bigger. So it helps a lot when turning really sharp or having to do a emergency braking. I really like that. But in terms of the general ergonomics of the wheel, I think that the body is just a bit too high. Like, I think that your knees are hitting really strongly against the shell, and it's just a bit too unwieldy. Like, you can get used to it, but it's still not comfortable per se. I think especially that the top part should be slanted, like on the S20, to give you a bit more comfort, or the pedals should be higher, so just the side, the shell of the wheel would end sooner for your legs. And especially because of the pedals, they're not that high. I will actually try out a lift kit in the future, which just lifts up the pedals, and I think then I will really like the ergonomics of the Abrams a lot more. Last but not least, the veteran Abrams was the wheel that I have been riding the most seated. It's very, very comfortable to ride this wheel seated. I don't have really much of a seat there. It's just a teensy-weensy bit of foam, but it's great to control it when you hold the roll cage in the front. The 22-inch tire gives you lots of stability. At low speed, probably you would want to stand up, but for longer rides, for seated rides, it's pretty great actually to ride on the veteran Abrams. And I think of all of the wheels I tried to ride seated yet, this is by far my favorite. So if you like seated riding, yeah, the Abrams is really great for that. With that said, let's move on to performance. And as I said before, there isn't really much of acceleration, torque, or braking here. Yeah, I was actually quite disappointed to see that in pretty much all the areas I could test, it was just worse than the veteran Sherman, except for top speed. So let's get into that. First up, let's start with some incline tests, and I could do some 30-degree inclines, 25-degree inclines, essentially without problems, although the motor was sounding really, really weird. There was like these clicks. I think the motor is just like too high speed for that wheel. And I really needed quite a bit of effort to push the wheel up the hill. It's not easy to climb with this wheel. And especially at 133-degree incline, the lights just started flickering at the end, indicating that there's some sort of too big voltage sag in the battery, so that's concerning. It could go up to 35-degree incline, but that also just barely, indicating it's pretty close to the performance like the Guads HS wheels, and it could not go up a 40-degree incline, which the Sherman actually can do. So not the best performance here. In terms of acceleration, I didn't do a proper acceleration test. What I did is a acceleration test that I felt comfortable doing because I was too afraid with cutting this wheel off at high speed, so the result is probably underwhelming. And in regards of the brake test, yeah, this was also as hard as I wanted to go. Yeah, I just don't feel safe doing some extreme performance testing on the wheel, especially in regards of the cutouts that already happened. But high-speed cruising was something that I really liked on the veteran Abrams, especially because the beeps are also louder, more audible. So usually the beeps were kicking in at around 74 kilometers an hour. Once I pushed the wheel up to 76 kilometers an hour with beeps. So I think I feel more comfortable with going high speed on this wheel than on the Sherman. However, when hitting some bumps, especially at a bit of a lower battery, I think the beeps kick in a bit earlier. So even if it can go fast, you need to be like really loose, not to overpower the wheel at high speed. What I really liked about the veteran Abrams was the range, and even though it has a 2700 watt-hour battery in comparison to the 3200 watt-hour battery in a Sherman, I got pretty much the same range out of it. Now this also differs upon riding style, but across the world I've seen similar results that the range is very similar to the Sherman. So if you're looking for a long range wheel just for long cruises, then actually you won't feel that big of a difference between this and the Sherman, but you will feel a big difference with comfort, stability, and high-speed cruising. In general, the wheel was also really cool running, and that is also the case when EVs was testing this wheel when going up hills and doing the pendulum test. Now this might also be a weirdly placed temperature sensor, like in the veteran Sherman. However, there are no reports yet of a fried motherboard, so maybe they just did their homework here. In conclusion, in terms of performance, I just wouldn't really do that much performance on this wheel. High-speed cruising, yes, but no extreme acceleration, braking, or off-roading. Let's move on to practicality and features. First up, let's talk about the front light, and it is super blinding for all of the oncoming traffic. That's why I have a small shade from Hulai Market. It's very powerful, but I think there's too little adjustment vertically. So on the veteran Sherman, I can adjust my light really well, but here just the amount of adjustment I can do with the front light is too little. And especially when braking and accelerating, this light goes all over the place. And it's so extreme, I can show you on video. It's from seeing nothing at all and the light is shining just in front of your shoes to totally blinding anyone that would be in the way. So not really a big fan of the setup here. I think that they could use more of a light like the Emotion V11. I think that's still one of the best lights out there, and especially the pedal behavior doesn't help it at all. It is a bit more powerful than a Sherman, so if you're going off-road and really like point it in front of you, you don't care about other people, then yes, it will be a bit better, but it's still not my favorite. There are also two settings of the front light, and in both cases all of the diodes are on. It always turns on in the weaker setting, so you have to just like press once more to turn on the light. But that's that. Essentially, I was usually just riding in a stronger setting unless it was daytime. In terms of the taillight, it's not really visible, it's a bit weak, and the setting is really weird, so essentially just like one of these small elements is lighting up instead of the whole backlight. I hope they fix it in a future update. It should be always all elements visible, just like on basically any motorcycle or the InMotion V11. In terms of additional like gadget features on the wheel, there is no RGB on the side, there's no additional lighting, there is no Bluetooth speaker. Essentially all you get as a bonus is a USB port to charge up your phone. Now there is also a Leatt app to update your wheel and connect with it, but come on, it looks so janky, it's ridiculous. And so many people were asking me about the app to send it to them via like WeTransfer because it's not available anywhere. And it's sort of like you need to have all of these steps to even install the app, and you even can't send it for Google Drive because Google thinks this app is malicious. So yeah, Leatt, step up your game here. I'm happy though that you can update the software, which made my veteran Abrams a lot safer. There are two charge ports on the wheel, both GX16-5 behind a nice flap in the back. I would say charging up to like 10-12 amps is okay, which means you can charge up the wheel in like 3 hours with 10 amp charging. The stock charger is very slow though, and worse than on the veteran Sherman. It's just 2.3 amps, 11 to 12 hours for a full stock charge. That is slow. The only benefit of this charger is that probably won't be damaged during shipping, and it is fanless, which is nice because it's silent. The mudguard in the back is too short and it's not a stand. I needed to get additional Hulai Market accessories to make it a stand. And there was some mud going also through the sides of this mudguard. I really don't understand. They made such a good mudguard for the Sherman. How come they don't understand how to make a mudguard anymore? Like, my back was usually filthy, especially before I had the kickstand in the back. After going for a regular rainy ride or even just like with wet surface. In the front there is pretty much no mudguard, so yeah, your feet will additionally get wet from the water spraying in front of the wheel. Not the best performance here. The pedals are ginormous and they have these studs inside. They're not too grippy, but I guess they're better than on the Extreme Bull Commander. Still, I'm not sure if they're better than grip tape. They have no magnets, they have a small mechanism inside, which was working pretty well in my case. They're also very flat, so they're good for like longer cruises, but not necessarily for performance riding. I would like more of a V-shape, and of course Nylonove for optimum riding experience. I thought that the pedals were particularly slippery when wet or if there was just the tiniest amount of mud on them. The trolley handle was something that I really liked, and the system was essentially the same like on the veteran Sherman, but because the wheel is taller, actually the trolley handle is also more comfortable and it has a bit of a bigger grip. It also locks in place, top and bottom, and all of this was working well. I don't know how well it works in the long run because there's still some like wood screws to hold the top piece in place, and I don't know how robust the mechanism will be. The main display of the Sherman keeps being one of a key selling point. It's very visible, very readable. You can see the speed, battery, and you can also set up your wheel there. And it also displays fault codes on this display. Very nice. However, in a future model, maybe it would be nice if it would be pushed more forwards, like on the InMotion V12, so you don't need to look down so much, but more down and forwards. I would call it like semi-easy because you actually don't need access to the motherboard to change the tire. However, you do need to remove both sides of the shell, and you do need to open up a small box which is sealed shut with silicone that has the phase wires inside. And of course, it also all looks very janky. So I would say it's not an easy tire change, but it's already a bit better than it was before. Last up in this category, you can also see that I have a lot of accent colors and I have a lot of accessories on this wheel. So really quickly, to make this wheel really work well, I had to install, of course, pads, and my favorite pads here were the torque pads, and I also have some additional foam on top of them. I tried various pads. I will maybe also make a separate video about them in the future, but these were working the best. All of those yellow accents are from Hulai Market, and this is the light mod, the accent colors on the side, and the mount for the pads as well as the stand. Additionally, I also put some Shredlights both in the front and in the back, and especially in the back it was needed to provide some additional lighting. Alright, with that said, let's conclude it all. So for me personally, I have no idea how a designer or a team of designers that made the Sherman also did the Abrams. I see no resemblance of the great ingenuity and good design that was present on the Sherman. Yeah, I just can't see it on the Abrams. I think it's a niche wheel, it's a very good cruiser, very smooth and good for long distances. However, it could have been so much better if they used up the space for the batteries to its full extent. It's not a performance wheel. I also don't think it's a good wheel for heavier riders, especially heavier performance riders. It's huge and heavy, so in most cases, I would go with the Sherman. In some cases, maybe I would take the Abrams, but I would definitely think twice before doing so. So with that said, if you're still here, leave a like on the video, subscribe to see more content like this. I'll see you in the next video. See you soon. Glory to Ukraine.